And so we have limited inquiries on validity or of belief. You want to make sure that when somebody is making a reasonable accommodation request, especially when it comes to a religious accommodation, you're really looking at that request, making sure it falls under a valid religion and it's a reasonable belief or practice under that religion. Some accommodation requests that we see a time off request, schedule change, or workplace adjustments. The same kind of rules apply. Is it an undue hardship? Is the religious accommodation that's being requested by the employee, does it pose an undue hardship on the employer? One thing to note is it's very difficult for an employer to show that it poses an undue hardship on them for an accommodation request, especially when it comes to a religious request. You'd have to show that it's really expensive to the organization in order to implement that accommodation. It compromises workplace safety or efficiency. It infringes upon the rights of another employee, or it actually makes other employees incur more responsibility or potentially hazardous or burdensome work. It's really a case-by-case analysis, and whether or not you're placing an undue hardship on that employer. Like I said, it's very challenging for an employer to show that. There is no legal requirement to compensate employees for time off for religious observance, including holidays, unless, of course, they're provided by a company agreement or policy or collective bargaining agreement. This is hard for many employees to understand. Coming from a staffing industry, it's very hard for people to understand that holidays, you don't automatically get a holiday off. And when you do get a holiday off, or when you're required to work on a holiday, it doesn't automatically mean that you get premium compensation or time and a half for hours worked on those days. So it is important for employers to know that there is no legal requirement, at least in New York, for people to be compensated for time off on those religious holidays. Okay. Undue hardship, we kind of talked about a little before. It's a religious accommodation request that is considered burdensome or involves an excessive cost to the employer. A request that substantially harms employee morale, reduces efficiencies in other jobs, or infringes upon the rights of other workers. An accommodation that causes a safety concern for the employee or coworkers. Like I said, it's really hard for an employer to show that there is an undue hardship for an accommodation request, especially when you've got a company that has, say, 10 individuals working in the same job or the same position. So if somebody asks for a schedule change, I can't work on Saturdays, it's very easy to shift around some schedules to make sure that one individual has off on that Saturday.